Hello everyone, and welcome to part 2 of learning PHP programming. In this lesson, I am going to teach you about PHP syntax, comments and errors. The purpose of this lesson is to give you enough information for you to clearly understand PHP syntax in a way that will allow you to comfortably begin writing PHP scripts with minimal errors. I will start by telling you about terminating PHP instructions. Just as in the English language, you terminate a sentence with a period, in PHP, you terminate a statement with a semicolon. This tells the interpreter that the end of the statement has been reached. I'll now show you an example. So I'll add the opening PHP tag. Initialize a variable, print that variable, and close the PHP block. Now, you'll notice this semicolon here. This closes the statement. So when the PHP interpreter passes this file, so runs this file, it will know that this semicolon here terminates this statement and this semicolon here terminates this statement. And I'll just demonstrate the output of that in the browser. We can see it prints the variable that is it prints var, which is stored in this variable. The final instruction of a PHP block does not need a semicolon, as the closing PHP tag implies a semicolon. So what that means is I can remove that semicolon there because this is the final statement within this PHP block and it will work just fine. Now, even though this works fine and it is perfectly valid, I discourage using this because I think it's better to be consistent with your coding. And for example, if you came back to this at a later date, there'll be a chance of you, or more of a chance of you, not terminating this statement when you add another one. So if I was to add a new statement, var2 equals var2, it'll be more likely for me to miss this semicolon here and just add this statement here when it's not there in the first place. But if you add a semicolon there, if you add a semicolon at the end of every statement, then you don't need to worry about it. There's no chance of you accidentally adding a new statement to the end of the PHP block without terminating the prior statement with a semicolon, because it is already terminated, and it's just a cleaner way to do things. But I thought I would show you that you have this option anyway, because it's good for you to, have all the information and all of the options that are open to you. Instruction separation. PHP instructions can be separated in various ways. For example, you can have the opening PHP tag on its own line, like so. Each instruction on its own line, like so. This instruction is on its own line, and so is this. And then the closing PHP tag on its own line. Another way to format things could be to have everything in one line. So you have the opening PHP tag on the line, and you have a statement on the same line, another statement on the same line, and then the closing PHP tag on the same line. So everything is on one line. And it's up to you which style you use. They're both perfectly fine. You'll probably use a mixture of both because, for example, if you have a PHP statement that is in between HTML, then you'll probably use this one line. So for example, if you had some HTML here, let's just add some HTML. Between, you'll probably just have things like this. But if you had a PHP block that had multiple statements inside it, then you would probably have everything on its own line. So it just depends. The important thing is that you're consistent with your coding style and your code is organized in such a way to make it easier for other programmers to read and understand. If PHP is the last code within a file, so essentially the PHP block is at the end of the file, then you can omit the closing tag. So this closing tag here could be omitted because this is the last PHP block within the file. So if I add var equals var print var, this will be perfectly fine. I'll add a couple of break tags as well so it doesn't stick everything on one line. We can see that works fine. Because this is the last PHP block within this file and it is the last piece of code within the file, then we can omit the closing PHP tag. But for example, if I try to omit this PHP tag, then we will get an error because of course there is code afterwards, so it is not valid without that closing tag. It's very important to follow PHP syntax and rules as to minimize errors in your code. You may think it's trivial to forget a semicolon, but the PHP interpreter cannot think for itself and it needs very precise instructions. Forgetting a terminating semicolon will cause the PHP interpreter to continue to the next statement as if it is part of the current statement and will most probably cause an error. So for example, if I remove this semicolon, we get an error. Thankfully, PHP is quite descriptive with its errors. We can see here pass error, so that means it's an error passed in the file. It's a syntax error. It is not expecting to see print, and it is in this file index.php on line 5. So with that, it's pretty simple to fix. You go to the file, you see line 5, it's not expecting to see this, and the reason why is because we have not terminated this statement with a semicolon. So just change that and all is good. Next I'll talk about opening and closing PHP tags. PHP has up to 5 opening and closing PHP tags, some of which have been omitted in PHP version 7.0 and above, and some of which are discouraged. You of course already know one, which is this one here. This is the opening PHP tag, this is the closing PHP tag. Now these opening and closing PHP tags are available no matter what. It doesn't matter what version of PHP you have, it doesn't matter how it's configured, it doesn't matter about anything. These are always available, and for that reason and other reasons, that is why you'll see them the majority of the time that you see PHP. So I'd say over 99% of the time you're adding PHP, you'll use this opening PHP tag and this closing PHP tag. There is also a shorthand for echoing. So shorthand for echo. Now this is the equivalent of this. So these two are the same essentially, and I will just demonstrate those here. In fact, I'll add a couple of break tags as well, separate them. Yeah, we can see these two are identical and essentially these do the same thing. And yeah, there are some of the other options are, show one now, you can use script type equals PHP. Now this was removed in PHP version 7.0 and it is discouraged from being used. Essentially there is no real reason to use this because you've got this version which is always available and that is the one that you should use, but again I thought I'll show you it just to give you all of the options that you have. You can also use the ASP style opening and closing tags like this, and these were also removed in PHP version 7.0, and again you have no real reason to use these, so you shouldn't use them. but again, I just wanted to show you that they are available for you, and if you're using a certain version of PHP and it's configured a certain way. And another option, the final option, is like so. So again, you might have noticed that actually in these options, most of the options I've showed you, apart from the script one and the ASP style, the closing PHP tag is the same. It's just the opening PHP tag that is different. And this option, to use this option, you need either short open tag, the short open tag directive to be enabled in php.ini, or you need PHP to be configured with enable short tags. So the enable short tags option. And again, there is no reason to use this. So I would discourage using this option, because this is the best way to do it. This is available everywhere. And yeah, so I'll remove those. This option here, this shorthand for echo, prior to PHP version 5.4.0, you needed, similar to the ones that I just mentioned before, you needed to have the short open tag directive enabled in php.ini, or you need PHP to be configured with enable short tags, so the enable short tags option. But from PHP 5.4.0 and onwards, this is available everywhere. So this is fine to use, because I'll be surprised if you're using a version of PHP below 5.4.0. So yeah, these are pretty much available everywhere, and they're safe to use for the shorthand for echo. And these tags here, this opening tag, this closing tag, is what you should be using for your normal PHP blocks pretty much all of the time, 100% of the time. The only time you might want to use something different is when you want to use the shorthand for echo. When PHP interprets a file, so when the file is run through the PHP interpreter, it looks for the opening and closing PHP tags and interprets everything between them. Passing files in this manner allows PHP to be embedded within various documents, as everything outside of the PHP tags is output as is. So essentially what that means is when PHP finds code that is not within the PHP tags, it just sends it to the browser or wherever it's going. No worries, it doesn't care about it. It can go. It doesn't have to interpret it. It doesn't have to do anything to it. You can just send it on its way. There are a couple of exceptions to this. New lines immediately after closing PHP tag are not sent to the browser. So essentially, this new line here on line 7, that will not be sent by the PHP interpreter. Another exception is if PHP is in the middle of a conditional statement. So for example, if I had the following, okay, let's do this, expression equals true, PHP if expression equals true, else, and then let's end this if statement, and if. So if expression equals true, then let's output expression is true, and if it is not, let's output expression is not true. Now, of course, expression is true because we've inserted true into the expression variable. But if I'll show you the output of that. So, yep, of course, it outputs expression is true. And the reason being is because when PHP interprets this code block here, this if statement, this conditional clause, it will evaluate it and then use the result to determine what to output. And of course, in this case, it determines that expression does equal true, so this is what it outputs, and it does not output this statement here. So those are the two exceptions. And let's demonstrate if it just finds some HTML. So is HTML paragraph. And of course, when PHP interprets this, it will see this opening PHP tag and it will interpret everything in here. So it will run this through the interpreter and get the result. And then we have the closing PHP tag, so it will just send this as is, this paragraph. It doesn't care about this. It doesn't need to interpret it. It can just send it as it is. And of course, this statement here in between PHP tags will the interpreter will evaluate it, and whatever the result is, it will send it to the browser or wherever it's going, along with everything else. We can see this is a HTML paragraph. This is shorthand for echo. If a file contains just PHP, it is encouraged to omit the closing PHP tag as to not accidentally output whitespace or a new line outside of the closing PHP tag. So I'll give you an example of that. You see inside this file, it contains only PHP. It's got the name of helper functions, and essentially the name is pretty explanatory. It is just going to contain functions you can use within it. So it will not contain any HTML or any CSS or any JavaScript or anything other than PHP code. So you do not need the closing PHP tag. And the reason why you should omit it is because if you're using PHP without output buffering on, and PHP finds white space outside of closing PHP tag, so if I had this tag here and I had some white space there, then PHP will begin outputting information. So it'll begin sending information, and as soon as that happens, there are things you cannot do. For example, you cannot redirect the user once output has been sent. Yep, you can't. Normally you can use header redirect and send the user to another page, but you cannot do that once PHP has started to output data to the browser or wherever it's outputting it to. The same with a new line, with a line return. So essentially, if you do have a closing PHP tag within a file that contains just PHP, then there are things that you need to be concerned about and you need to check, and you need to be conscious of, because it could cause you issues, and they will be unnecessary issues because you could remove the risk of those issues by simply not closing or not having the closing PHP tag. So moral of the story is, do not include a closing PHP tag within a file that contains just PHP. It will save you headache, and it is encouraged to just not have it there. It's not needed, it doesn't benefit you in any way, so it's better just to omit the closing PHP tag, and as to reduce certain risks and certain issues that you might come into. Last but not least, I'm going to talk about comments. PHP supports C, C++, and Unix shell style comments. This includes a single line comment signified by or begun by 2 forward slashes. So essentially, if you got your PHP and you got 2 forward slashes, then anything from that point onwards on that line will be treated as a comment. Another option is to use the hash. So instead of the 2 forward slashes, you have a hash symbol, and again that will signify a single line comment, and everything from that point onwards will be treated as a comment. That is until the end of, for both of them, that is until the end of the statement is reached or the end of the PHP block is reached, whichever one comes first. And there is an option for a multi-line comment, and that is signified by a forward slash and a asterisk, and an asterisk and a forward slash. So on one line you'd have a forward slash and an asterisk, and on another line where you want to close the comment block, you'll have a asterisk and then a forward slash. And I'll demonstrate them now. So if I remove this stuff, this is a single line comment. that is the first option. Then I'm just going to copy and paste those. Show the other option. I can just replace the 2 forward slashes with a hash symbol, as I mentioned earlier, and these are essentially the same. This is the same as this, and this is the same as this. As I mentioned, the comment is terminated by the end of the statement or the end of the PHP block, which of course the end of the PHP block is what comes here. So once the PHP interpreter gets to this, anything outside of it is not in PHP mode, so it leaves PHP mode. So what that means is I could add a p tag is a HTML paragraph, and this will get output as HTML because we are not in PHP mode. It is not treated as part of this comment, and the same will happen here, for example. So we'll just see that. You see this is a HTML paragraph, this is a HTML paragraph. Their output is HTML. They are not treated as part of this comment, or part of this isn't part of this comment, and this is not part of this comment. But if I add the p tag here, we are still in PHP mode here, so this is treated as part of the comment. Everything on this line is treated as part of the comment because we are still in PHP mode. Same with this here. I'll show you some of the other options. If this is available, so if this way of opening and closing a PHP block is available, then it behaves exactly the same as this. So you could have the single line here like this, or you could have it the single line within the block, so on its own line. So you could have everything on one line like this. In fact, I'll just copy and paste that just to really make it clear what I mean. You could have this. The IDE does not understand these tags. It doesn't support these tags as PHP tags, so you can see it is not signifying that this is a comment in the same way that this is. So you can see it's graying this out. It's turning this grey so we can visually see that it's a comment. We can tell that it's a comment and it is not code. It doesn't do this for this because it doesn't treat these as PHP tags, because they really should not be used as PHP tags. But of course I want to show you all of your options, so I'm going to just change that and see. But if you are using these as comments, as opening and closing PHP tags, then this is exactly the same as this. This one here, and this here, and this here. If you use the other option, then you could add an inline comment like this. But the difference being, if I have this on this line, this will all be treated as, sorry, that's wrong, not script tag, script type. Let's give that a bit more space. In fact, I want to be able to see this. This is a comment. I'm just going to leave it there because I want to be able to see this all in the video. Yeah. This will be, if we have this option to use this, which I don't because of the version of PHP I'm using, and again the IDE does not understand these tags as PHP. It does not signify them as opening and closing PHP, so it does not treat this as a comment. Hence the reason why it is not grayed out like a comment should be. But if you have the option of using these within PHP, then you can use this comment style, no problem. But one thing is, it will not break out of PHP mode when it sees this tag here if we are using a comment here, if it's on the line, the same line as a comment. So essentially what that means is this, everything here will be treated as a comment. This will not be treated as HTML. It will all be treated as a comment, this whole thing here. And the same thing if we change it to the hash. So that is the difference between this script tag and this. and we can see this is a comment. This is the same as this. Actually, I'm not entirely sure about that. Let me see if that throws any errors. Yep, so you can't add comments in between these tags because they echo, which makes sense actually, because of course they're just echoing a statement or a string. I mean, let's just put this as a string, something generic. Yeah, because this is shorthand for echo, of course it would not make sense for a comment to be in between these tags, and that is the reason why you cannot add a comment between these two tags. So we've reached the end of this video. I hope you found it helpful and informative. If you did and you find you know someone else that could benefit from this video, then it'll be good if you shared it with them. Be sure to check out some of my other videos. If there isn't a sequel to this video at the moment, don't worry, I'm making videos weekly, so they'll check back each day and there'll be a new video sequel to this video, which will be lesson 3 in PHP programming before you know it. And until next time, take care.